Thanks, everybody. My name is Ryan Pruitt. As Pablo mentioned, Justice mentioned, I'll be the moderator for this panel. First of all, honestly, just want to thank everyone for being here. I want to thank Justice and Pablo for organizing an absolutely incredible event, and also for making me drive about 5 hours from Miami through basically nothingness to get here. But I was saying, to be fair, I probably waited in less traffic on a turnpike than I did for lunch, so all good. Just a bit of background on myself. I'm a managing director at Ocean Azul Partners. Ocean Azul is a early stage VC fund based out of Miami. We focus on B2B enterprise software and deep tech. I actually got my start as a CPA, working at Deloitte. I did 3 years in Miami, 7 years in Australia, working with Deloitte, and all the while I was out there doing a lot of angel investing, focusing on Florida, Miami, and found out that was my passion. Quit my job, moved back from Australia to Miami, and joined Ocean Azul, and here I am. But, let's get to the more important people, our panelists here. We have an amazing group, and maybe we start off with a little bit of background on you guys, and then we'll get to the questions. So maybe we just go in order here. So Tony, if you want to set us up.
My mom taught me to let ladies first, please.
So sorry, Olivia.
Never say no to that. My name is Olivia Gaudre. I am a partner and VP of Operations at Fuel Venture Capital, and I'm assuming this is a short intro. So I'll just start. Fuel Venture Capital is a early to late stage investor in tech-based companies. We now have 4 funds, about 500 million AUM, and we're based out of Miami, Florida. Been there for the past 7 years, and just investing globally, but we do have a focus on Miami as well.
I'm Chris Langford, a managing partner of Home Technology Ventures. We are a seed stage venture capital fund dedicated to backing founders who are obsessed with solving the biggest problems in housing. We started in 2013 as the corporate venture capital arm of Lowe's. I bought that out in 2019 as the basis to form Home Technology Ventures. And yeah, we love working on the big problem and the big challenge sitting in front of us, which is how do we make houses more resilient, more affordable, more efficient, etc.
Hi, I'm Tony Jimenez. I'm a proud Gator alum. Go Gators! I'm excited to be here and share a little bit about our stories. So I'm the managing partner of an early stage venture fund focused on what we call frontier tech with a special focus on dual use, which means we like to focus on companies that are in the private space that want to do business with the government. So that's kind of a particular common thread in what we look like and what we look at. And we are a fund based in Miami as well, and we look at seed and Series A. And we were founded by Manny Medina, who you're going to have a chance to hear from a little bit later in the keynote.
Awesome. Now, first question, Olivia, where'd you go to college?
I'm an FSU alum, but we're all photopologists. We all work well together, even though I would not be seen wearing the UF colors here today, but I support UF, definitely.
Sorry about that. You've all taken very different paths to get where you are today as partners in VC funds. So for some of the people in the audience today that want to break into investing, that want to get into VC, whether it's starting an internship or whatever, what kind of advice would you give them? What kind of advice would you give them to start off in venture capital? Anyone?
So I'll get started. Whenever I'm asked by somebody that's kind of enamored by venture capital and they're young and kind of getting their career started, my advice is usually, if you really like and feel excited by what venture capitalists do, is go work at a company. And I think Brian Murphy's advice earlier was really poignant, and it's, you really have to know and understand what it takes to stay up those late nights and work with your brothers and sisters in arms when you're in the trenches and figure out what you need to do to help that company survive. Because as a VC, you have to understand those struggles because these founders are going to need you in their darkest moments, and also they want to be able to celebrate that with you in your best moments. So my advice is always, the best way to get into VC is go in and learn inside of a company and understand the nuts and bolts of what it takes to build and scale a company.
So I actually had a pretty non-traditional entry into venture capital. So I started interning at a really young age, which shout out to anyone who does early internships. I think it's really important, especially as you're young and you have the most opportunities in front of you. And it's a good way to hone in on exactly what you want to do, and that's how I used it. I worked at some big corporations, I worked at smaller emerging managers, and I really enjoyed that smaller environment and the growth opportunities that it allowed. And so when I graduated from FSU, I was exploring several options in South Florida, in New York, in San Francisco, and one of the connections that I made through one of those internships reached out, and we had maintained a relationship throughout my college life, and said that there was an internship opportunity at Field Venture Capital. And at that time, you know, I was young, and I had all of the doors open, and to me, it was more important to get in an early stage venture capital. I liked the managing directors of the firm, which is of course very important. You know, you were entering this career, you want to make sure that you have mentors, especially as a younger person in VC, right? And I had that growth mentality and was able to put in the effort into the job that it required, and especially VC requires. And so now, you know, I'm a partner of the firm. I've worked here for 6 years, so that's a very non-traditional path into VC. I put in 80-hour work weeks every week, which I think everybody at this panel can admit to having done over the past however long they've been working in VC. So it's certainly a passion that you have to have. I think that the biggest piece of advice that I would give is just to say yes to every opportunity that comes your way, especially when you come in as a sort of white slate, right? You don't have any preconceived notions, you have your own thoughts and opinions, but learn as much as possible from the people around you, and be willing to put in the time and the effort that it takes to self-study. Because you're not going to necessarily have a mentor who says, do this, don't do this. You may not be that fortunate, right? So you have to be willing to read, listen to podcasts, you know, watch interviews, do as much as you can, get as much face time as possible with investors, with founders, as the firm allows you to, because that's just going to set you up for success.
Yeah, I'd say I've mostly seen 3 archetypes that get into VC. The first, I'd say the most like traditional, is go to a great school, do investment banking in some sort of technology investment banking field, use that to kind of parlay it into an associate role. That's kind of really standard, but I find most of the time those people end up plateauing at associate level. They don't really make it to partner level. So I think that's an entry into it, but I haven't seen it be like a really gateway to the spot you want to be in. The second archetype is someone who's just obsessed with creating a network in their local ecosystem. So that's a combination between taking a job at a local high growth company to kind of learn the inside outs, going to all the events, networking with all the investors, and just starting to build kind of their own personal brand. I think they focus on something they're passionate about. Maybe they blog about it. Maybe they create some sort of center of gravity where people within that network lean on them in that particular discipline. They start to kind of separate themselves. And then the third are people who just make a bunch of money and invest their own money, right? So those are kind of the 3 paths that I generally see of people. The one thing I always say is like don't romanticize it. I think whether it's TechCrunch or whoever will tell you like it's not all private jets and parties and all that stuff. It's a ton. We have to raise our own money too every 3 years, and that's really hard. And you know, there is a science to managing a fund. There's a ton of administrivia to managing a fund. There's a whole bunch of personalities that you have to manage on that end, and then all along the same thing, you have to give your all through board seats and advice and all these other things. So if you're doing it because you think it's a sexy industry or a lot of money, I promise you you're not gonna find that. At least not for a long time.
That was great. So you all alluded to difficult times and getting through difficult times. Without unlocking any childhood traumas here, I'm not here to be your psychologist, but what were some of the things you guys may have learned, or maybe some of the best lessons you've learned through going through difficult times, whether it be, in your personal or professional lives. And it can be maybe, used for some of the entrepreneurs and maybe coming up investors here.
I'll start it off. I think first of all, you learn about how much conviction you have in the thing that you're doing, because there are many days, it generally corresponds with during our own fundraising cycles, but where you think to yourself, why am I doing this? Like, why am I going through like hundreds of rejections, 100-hour weeks, all of this stuff? Like, why am I doing this? And I think hard times really build conviction in what you're doing, and it really tests that within you. Builds a lot of resiliency. It gives you an opportunity to understand good times in a way that you don't if you haven't gone through some of those hardships. And so I think that sometimes people tell stories up here about the hardships that they go through and the war stories, and it truly isn't some sort of badge of honor per se, but it's just inevitable, right, in entrepreneurship. And I think every person who's succeeded has gone through it and looked at themselves in the mirror 10 or 20 times and said to themselves, do I really want to get up today and charge this hill? And it's like in those moments when you find the most clarity about why you get up and do it every day.
Yeah, I mean, just to bridge on that, there's a lot of things that, the same questions that we ask the startups that come and sit in front of us are the same questions that we ask new team members who enter our firm. You have to have, like you said, Tony, you have to have, or Chris, that why, right? You have to have the reason why you're getting up every day, dedicating 80 hours to your founders, to your investors. It's a fortunate position to be in between the investors and the founders, but it's also a lot of responsibility. And so you have to have that driving factor. I think that there's a lot that's mirrored on, in terms of VC compared to startups. Right? Not just the team members, not just the mentality of being entrepreneurial or sitting in the shoes of the founders who sit in front of you. But there's a lot that is similar between the journeys of a startup and the journeys of VCs. We started out with one fund with 3 companies. Now we're at 4 funds, 500 million AUM. It takes a lot of work to get there and a lot of difficult days. And you're not going to have all shiny days in front of you. You're going to have to deal with a lot of things. And you're dealing with those things along with your founders, right? We're very active managers. We don't just invest capital and walk away and say, we're going to revisit this in 5-7 years, right? We're very active with the companies we invest in because we think we'll be able to provide value to those companies in certain tangible ways. And that's also what we look for, in those companies, is what value can we bring to them. And so, when it comes to managing a venture capital fund, fundraising for a venture capital fund, a lot of that, again, mirrors the startup journey. And so it makes it more relatable to the startups when we're able to use those experiences and share our perspectives with those founders. Even if you don't have that entrepreneurial background coming into VC. I don't know if that answers it.
I fully agree with my colleagues here. I think the common thread here is rejection and hardship. So entrepreneurship is not for the faint of heart. It's you have to have the mettle, you have to have the grit, the resiliency, the determination. So I'll actually switch my hat out now to founder. So I founded a company about 6-7 years ago, and to this day we haven't been able to raise venture capital money, and I'm a venture capitalist. I have a plant-based food consumer brand that does B2B and B2C, but it has nothing to do with what we do as a fund. But every rejection gets us close. It gives us more fuel in our tank. It's like we're going to show these people, that what we really mean here. So you have to have that drive. You have to have that mentality of every rejection you're getting closer to a yes. And it also forces you as an organization, as a company, as your partners to kind of dig in and figure out, look, we need to find this innovation that's going to get us over the hump. How are we going to make payroll next week? How are we going to pay our vendors? How are we going to keep this thing going? Because you believe in it so much that it doesn't matter what it takes, you're going to be willing to do it.
Tony, that's a great segue into the founder side. We've obviously all heard the term founder market fit. when you guys are deploying capital, when you guys are assessing a team, right, and the founders that you want to invest in, you want to put your money and your time and everything, what are some of the key qualities you look for when you think you found a good founder and a good founder market fit?
I'll get us started. So, you know, where we're investing very early, so seed is kind of where we're focused. So at this point, product market fit is, you know, rarely do we see really strong traction. It's kind of just starting to get going. So we depend almost 100% on what's behind that team. And do they have what it takes? And I'll go back to what I just said. It's, you know, do they have that? Do they have, obviously, the understanding of the market? Do they have an understanding of what the problem they're trying to solve? And is there a real demand for it? So at the end of the day, it comes down to, you know, quite simply, is this team willing to stay up long nights, sleepless nights, figuring out how to solve all the problems that are going to come for them? Because this journey of entrepreneurship is just about figuring out problems and figuring out solutions. So for us, that's probably one of the most important things that we look for.
Yeah, I mean, I think we, you know, our fund looks at very similar characteristics as Tony and I'm sure as Chris does. I think that, you know, it's, when you look at early stage startups, you hear it again and again. It's a bet on the founder, it's a bet on the team, right? It's making sure that there's a strong buy factor. From a VC perspective, we're marrying these companies, right? We want to ensure that they will be successful. We have to believe in the vision of the company. It's not just the founders who have to believe in it, it's ourselves, right? Because we want to be able to pitch this company to, you know, potential clients, our investors for our fund, for fundraising purposes, which then in turn helps those companies, right? So it's this virtuous cycle that I think is underplayed sometimes, where it's seen as like the founders versus the VCs, but the right VCs are truly partnering with the companies they invest in, because it is a long-term investment, and we want to ensure the company's success, not only for the benefit of our investors and for the fund, but for the benefit of the founders themselves. And so it is this symbiotic relationship that I think, you know, with some firms it's maybe less symbiotic, but for active investors like the people on this panel, I think that's very much important to us.
So we use a 3-part underwriting of every founding team. And our 3 characteristics are obsession, expertise, and character. And so the first question that we always ask is, does this person see a future that I don't see in such an unhealthy way that they're going to like manifest it? It's like everything that they think about, they eat, sleep, it's like, this is everything that's on their brain. Every conversation that they have, every action that they take is about manifesting this future that is so clear and obvious to them, but is like an injustice that it doesn't exist in the world. So we start with this concept of obsession. Once we get past that, then the next thing is, do they and or their team have the expertise to actually execute against the business? So they may, you know, I could say, oh, I see this thing in the world that requires me to have a PhD, and I don't have a PhD, right? That doesn't really do me any good. So we talk about whether or not the team holistically has the expertise to execute against that obsession. And then the last part is we underwrite their character. So do they follow up? Do they, when they say they will, do they treat people like kindly, which is kind of like a big deal for us. Do they have, can I find elements of resiliency? Do they consistently overachieve in life? Like, what are some of the ways that we see this within them? And so that's really the 3 parts that we've always looked at. And we have to feel really good about all 3 of them. And that's pretty much the most important thing we underwrite.
I'm going to actually add one more piece, which is, I think the other thing that we also look at a lot is how well they can sell. Because a founder has to be able to sell multiple parties, just like VCs do, right? We have to be able to sell our investors to invest in our funds. We have to be able to sell to our venture partners to share deal flow with us. We have to sell to founders to let us invest in them, right? Depending on if it's a investor-driven, founder-driven market, right? So the same thing on the startup side, on the founder side. They have to sell to their employees. Why should their employees work for you instead of a much larger corporation that could pay them 10 times the amount that you're going to be paying them, right? You have to sell them that vision. You have to sell your clients the vision. Why do they work with you as opposed to one of those multinational organizations, right? Why are they taking a bet on you? So you have to, I think founders have to have this like pure sales mentality, and that stays with them throughout the whole cycle or as long as they're part of the company.
We described it as they have to be able to convince a lot of people to do something irrational. Like
Yes.
everything about a seed investment or starting in a seed company is completely irrational. Like nobody should be involved in this thing.
Right.
You know, like, yeah, if we're being honest. But they have to convince people to give millions of dollars and employees to give up their time and their life, and customers to use something that's probably inferior to something they might be able to get in the market today. And so, yeah, that's like, I think that comes with that combination of that obsession. It's like they can tell you so much about the future you're about to be in that you feel like, this doesn't make any sense, but I guess I'm in, like, let's do it.
But I think that's a lot about like VC and the startup life in general. There's a lot of juxtapositions in it, right? You have to be very passionate yet humble as a founder, right? To be able to attract those people. I think there's a lot of things on the investor side that there's juxtapositions in that as well. So you have to sort of be able to like look past that and see the vision no matter where you are.
No, it was great, fantastic conversation. I want to shift gears a little bit and get a specific question for you, Olivia. Obviously, VC is a very heavily male-dominated industry, right? I mean, I think it's something that 75% of VC funds do not have a single female partner. I believe Fuel has 2 female partners, right? I guess, what are you doing, and I guess how have you thrived in such a male-dominated industry, and I guess what are you doing to empower other women who want to be in your shoes?
Yeah, sure. So interesting that the person being asked the question is me on the stage. Maybe we should expand the question to everyone else. But I do know that they have similar thought processes to me in the sense that, I mean, one thing, and just going back a little bit, one reason that I joined Fuel was the mentorship part. I knew coming in as a young female in VC that I would have a mentor in another female also starting out her career in VC. Much longer career before that, hedge funds, finance, but this was the first, move into the private sector. And I had built that relationship with this individual beforehand, so I knew coming into it that I'd have a strong mentor in this individual who's now our chief investment officer and one of the general partners. So, mentorship is really big, and it's sort of ingrained in this venture capital firm, whether it comes to Maggie, who's the CIO, or Jeff himself. I don't think that any individual in this room will make it without the support of men and women, no matter who you are, right? And so I think that that's super important, and a big part of Fuel is that mentorship ability. And that's something that comes with working at a smaller firm. You get more of those opportunities. So that's really big for us. I think the way we view it is, when we see young professionals coming into the industry, we take a mediocratic look at the resumes in front of us, right? We don't look at age, we don't look at gender, we look at the qualifications of the individual. And that helps give us a pretty level playing field. The fact that we have women in decision-making positions within the firm, we've noticed has led to an increased amount of women applying for jobs, right? So just having a CIO in the firm, a GP, myself a partner, in positions of authority in the firm has led to greater diversity within the team. And then the other thing, when you think about like diversity in VC, I think Miami's whole approach is we don't necessarily want to be the next Silicon Valley. We want to build out our own ecosystem here. We want to improve upon the challenges that Silicon Valley has faced and other hubs have faced, right? We want to learn from them, make it better. How can we do things differently? It's the same thing with VC. You're always trying to find a differentiation factor. You're always trying to find an edge. If you look around the room, and everybody is a white male, are you going to be making investments that are different than the other 95% of VC firms that look exactly the same? The answer is no. So it's the same thing with Medina Ventures. It's the same thing, with Chris, right? We bring to the table people with different opinions, different backgrounds, different thought processes, and that inherently will make us different than those areas. Let's leverage the advantages that we have here in Florida, being this connection to Europe, to Latin America, elsewhere in the world, right? This is a melting pot, Florida is, and let's leverage that, whether it comes to females in VC, or Latin Americans in VC, or blacks in VC. It all leads to better investment decisions at the table and yields higher returns for our investors. That's our thesis.
Yeah, if you don't mind me piggybacking on that. So we fully agree, and one of my partners is in the GP is a woman as well, and she happens to be my wife. So proud to have her as my partner. But one of the things that's near and dear to our hearts is creating that diversity and that inclusion within the tech ecosystem. So we also own a platform called Emerge Americas, which we convene one of the largest congregations of tech innovators in the state and throughout the region. And one of our biggest sort of proud data points of that conference just this past year, we had about 25,000 attendees. And for those of you who are familiar and accustomed to going to tech conferences, it's what Olivia was just saying, it's 95% white male. We are proud to say we have about 49%, 50%, so 49% female, 50% male. And within that, we are based in Miami, and we're proud to be based in Miami, and one of the big drivers of that is the diversity. So it's an extremely diverse, global, immigrant-led community of which we try to bring in as many diverse opinions, backgrounds, walks of life as we possibly can, because it only makes us better investors. It gives us a worldview that other people might not have, and it gives us some insights that we believe gives us an edge.
No, it's great, Tony. I was just about to talk about how much you advocate for the Hispanic community. Obviously, you and I are both Hispanic. I'm dying to keep coffee this afternoon right now, but it's incredible what you guys do at Medina and Emerge, and, as well as all of you here. But I think we're close to the time.
Ask them 30 seconds as a promise for who want to
Can we do that one?
Okay.
I'll give a piece of advice.
Do you want to do a Q&A? Someone?
No, I'll give a piece of advice. There's a fantastic, for university students, this is kind of like, I consider my Bible. There is a book called The Hard Things About Hard Things, written by Ben Horowitz. So Ben Horowitz is one of the founding partners of Andreessen Horowitz. It is one of the most unvarnished books about entrepreneurship that I've ever read, which dovetails into probably the most successful venture capital fund in the world today. So I highly, highly, highly recommend you reading that. It's a fantastic book that gives you, I think, the real world view and the raw view of what it is to be an entrepreneur.
Any more advice for maybe young founders or entrepreneurs in the room before we get to some Q&A?
I don't know if this is necessarily for founders, but just advice in general. I always recommend, I said it at the beginning, interning, getting a job while you're in college. You do have a lot of time on your hands right now. Leverage that opportunity. Make as many connections as possible. Get a job. It will help you to narrow down who you like working with, who you don't like working with, what environment you want to work in. And that alone is very important at this age to figure out. So,
I'd say for all founders, don't assume that venture capital is for you. It is for the underwriting of venture capital is a very specific asset class that's looking for a very specific type of outcome over a very specific time period. So there are so many ways to build and capitalize a business that has nothing to do with taking money from a venture capitalist. You can get caught up spending a lot of time and taking a lot of meetings pursuing something that doesn't make sense when you could be building your business, finding other ways, capitalizing and bootstrapping. I know nobody gets a headline for how much they bootstrapped until they sell it at the end and they own all the equity. But I think don't start from a position that if you're going to build a startup, that your first thing to do is to go raise money, because I think that's really not always the right starting spot.
Sorry, so I was told there was no time for Q&A, but these are the three most approachable human beings I've ever met, so please go up to them, bring them all your Q&A questions, bother them before they leave. But I think that's it. Thank you guys all so much, and thank you to our great panelists.
Thank you, Ryan. Okay.